right, welcome back. You're watching Sokoni, the tail end of the program right now, where the U.S. consumer group is suing Starbucks on... He actually sued Starbucks on Wednesday, accusing the Seattle-based coffee chain of falsely advertising its tea and coffee as ethically sourced while obtaining it from farms plagued by human rights abuses in Kenya, Brazil, and Guatemala. And it continues to say here that, for example, it said last year BBC reporters exposed rampant sexual violence against women and at a tea plantation in Kenya, and Brazilian authorities issued a complaint against Starbucks, the largest Brazilian coffee suppliers, for conditions analogous to slavery. And in 2020, the United Kingdom's Dispatches television program documented widespread child labor at coffee farms in Guatemala, according to the lawsuit. And Starbucks said last year that it had halted purchases from the operator of Kenya plantation. In 2020, it said that it had halted purchases from farms implicated in child labor for that harvest season. It was not immediately clear what action it has taken in response to Brazilian prosecutors' action. And this is what we were trying to focus on. And just cognating this with the 5% crop tax that also the government is seeking from farmers now as withholding tax. And I just want to also pick the brains of the chair of Java here, and also the chair of KEPSA Foundation, Patrick Obath.
Now, chair of Java crept in, I don't know from where, but that's one of the feathers I have. When we talk about value chain for these major commodities that are traded between Kenya and the rest of the world, over the last 20 years, there has been a lot of focus on making sure by the consumers on the other side that human rights abuses are not done in our country. And the amount of legislation and certification that has been put in place because of this perceived high level of human rights abuses in our country. I like the word perceived. Yeah? Yes. Is incredible. The cost of compliance for produce leaving Kenya to go out is extremely high. Some of it, yes, we can say is correct. Phytosanitary, 100% agreed. You know, we've got all these doodles and everything else that are sort of tropical that they don't want to go there. That you can understand. We have very good phytosanitary certification in this country. And it is controlled by the export agencies here. KEPIS was formed for that purpose. And I can tell you that the testing on things like flowers, horticultural produce, and everything else into Europe is at about 5%. And if they find anything, then the monitoring is increased. So the whole control environment is there. Now, if, say, for something like, say, the false codling moth, because I'm an avocado person, yeah? If they find that the false codling moth has gone in, they will say, let's increase surveillance so that we can be sure that the areas where it's coming from is understood, and then we stop it. Yeah? So the fact that certain things will slip through is a fact in every single organization in the world. That's why you have audit departments in companies and everything else. You have your systems, and something will go wrong. And you catch it, you repair it, and you move on. Getting back to Starbucks, the coffee that they get from Kenya, from everywhere else, there is I think it's called the Rainforest Alliance.
Correct.
And people like that who have issued a certificate after they have been to a farm or an organization and gone through their processes, and they're sure that they meet certain requirements, including putting into place procedures that ensure that human rights abuses are not done in that organization. But if I have 60 farms and one farm manager, an individual, a human being, decides to be rogue, and that is what you pick up, it does not mean that the company has actually gone rogue as a whole company.
Correct.
And that is what, I was going to use the wrong word. That is what really makes me annoyed by people who are sort of taking Starbucks to court. They probably picked up a local disagreement that somebody has taken and they want to amplify it so that they get a return. Yeah? Whereas most or 90% of the industry is working very well. Even 95% are working very well. But there's 1% somewhere who want to prove a point. And they go and call in the NGOs, the human rights people and everything else. They say, look at what is happening in this farm. And that farm, there are people who have got a local issue that they're trying to force. And that is what happens. And then you get this kind of story that goes, and they start with the people who get impacted most. The Starbucks of this world, the Marks and Spencers in the UK, whatever it is, those are the people who get hit first with a suit because of this small thing that is happening somewhere. It may be small in my view, but for other people, it may be a big thing because it's a livelihood in that area.
Right.
Right? So accepted. But the organizations that take that one event and turn it into a whole industry thing, I have no time for. I think they are basically doing that so they can get funding from whoever it is who funds them to show that they're doing something. There are quite a few NGOs that they are funded because of the number of court cases that they do. Mm-hmm. That is their KPI. And when they do that one, they get funded. Yeah? And yet the court cases they're putting up are not court cases that really merit any attention. Let me give you an example. My personal farm. I was there the other day over Christmas, and I found something which I did not expect, and I said I don't want. I didn't want children to work on my farm. But when I went there, they were harvesting beans. And this is something that the mother said, no, let's take our children there to do it on our behalf. In the meantime, we shall be doing something else, because this is a very simple thing. They can just uproot the beans and take them out. And I told my farm supervisor, if I find this happening again, you're fired. No child labor on this farm of mine. Yeah? So a small thing like that, somebody can pick it up and say, now you're refusing employment. And it can be blown out of proportion, right? That I allowed child labor on my place. Whereas the issue is I stopped it because some people were doing it at the wrong time, because children are on holiday. The women say, let the children do the work. Yeah?
They be busy in the farm.
That keeps them busy.
And
That's beneficial
so
to them.
I would then be vilified for allowing child labor when I didn't actually do it, but I found out and stopped it. But the fact that it happened when I was not there, that's it. You're out. Yeah. And I think that is what is happening with the Starbucks case, and a lot of others that that you find. I think even the ones in the tea industry and whatever it is, you'll find that there is a domestic issue at that lower level.
But if we have this verification processes that you're talking about, the quality checks, and if at all there has been involvement of child labor, and you have all those boxes ticked, why then will the Starbucks be holding now purchases from farms that are...
They have probably found that in that particular area, they've tried to stop it and it can't stop. So you then say, I'm not going to buy from there. Yeah? Because in certain areas, I mean, you go to, when you had the issue of child labor in, the biggest issue of child labor we had in Kenya was in the salt works around Malindi. Yeah? 10, 15 years ago. Children used to go there and work because there was no school fees. Right? And getting salt and whatever it is and all that kind of stuff. So for everybody in that location, the mothers, the fathers and everything else, that was fine. Let the children work and they can earn school fees and they go to school, because they had no other way of doing it. Now, when that happens, right, because of the local circumstances, and you can't stop it because that is the way people are, you pull out of that place and don't go to work. It took us, then I was in the Federation of Kenya Employers, it took us 4 years to stop that practice in Malindi. In the salt flats, there was quite a few, 4 or 5 companies that were at these big salt pans that they used to let seawater come in and then it evaporates and then they get the salt, go and purify it. And it's the children who used to do that. And if you saw the sores that they had on their legs as a result of salt, I mean, it was pathetic. But that had been common practice because there was no other livelihood for those children to go to school. So in the time you're stopping that, right, you pull out. So Starbucks will pull out of Guatemala, wherever it is, because they found a cultural thing that they cannot stop because of their standards, and you live out. Okay? But if you impose those standards in a place like that and people comply, you can be sure that somebody else at some point will go back to that, because that is an easier way of working than it is complying. So I think let's not blow things out of proportion, right? We should understand that there is a global standard within the supply chains that are required, and that global standard is being applied in this country, but you have those local things that happen that sometimes you may apply the standard and you think everybody's complying, and then you turn your back a little bit, bang, it comes through. And somebody then says, you are wrong. Yeah, and let's admit, it does happen.
Yeah, I think if we have an injunction from the courts right now, and I'm just wondering, Java or Could you talk about Starbucks or Zasini being a huge exporter to Starbucks or Java as it is right now?
Yeah.
What sort of shocks are we having in your books in that particular, when you're talking about looking at your books and the export expenditure or the export profit that will be coming from it?
If we are not complying and we've got large non-compliance in the company, we'll be hit. That's for certain. Because we will find it, and if our own ethical standards means that our own internal processes have failed, we will stop, correct it, and then offer ourselves again. That is what a company that obeys ethical standards will do. That's what you will do. You will correct and then go, if it is endemic in the company. If it's an isolated incident, you close that one and say, guys, we found this, it is in this isolated area, the rest of us, we are okay, we will sort this out, and eventually we'll tell you we sorted it out, and we continue. That is how a responsible company operates.
Right.
And whatever you find in Starbucks, you probably find the same in Sasini, I don't know. Jim can talk about that. But any company, I'm speaking generally, compliance in this day and age is a huge thing. And if you hear the word ESG, right, that ESG includes these kind of things. And if you're looking for compliance, continue to be quoted in the stock market in Kenya, to get markets abroad, to get financing from anybody, those are the things you have to make sure you are not just saying that you're doing, but you actually do them.
But I also have we received any sustainability reports from Java, from Sasini? You're a listed company, aren't you?
We are a listed company.
You're not listed. No. You're not
but
listed.
we have a sustainability report.
You have a sustainability.
Yes.
Okay, and Sasini.
And we do too.
You do as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the way to be now. If you don't have it,
this is self-regulating. They self-regulate themselves. They don't have to be told somebody out there.
Right, but also questions have been raised regarding this sustainability reports and the greenwashing bit of it. That yes, we do not have sufficient metrics and auditing of a sustainability report in this country, as it were. This is a fairly new development when you're talking about ESG. What metrics are you using to make sure that what you report is actually what is on the ground? So how do we ethically also investigate that this is what you've given to your reports?
We have an external auditor that looks at our sustainability report, right? It's just like your normal, your normal financial statements, right? You prepare them, you do everything else, you get an auditor to come and look at them, certify them, and then you put them out.
Absolutely.
Sustainability auditors are not yet certified in this country. There's a process of that happening.
That's what I'm saying.
I think there are 2 or 3 companies currently that are preparing certification processes for the auditors, but they are there, right? But we just need to get them now certified by an independent body so that we, as their employers, are sure that we have got people who are right. But at the moment, we have a network that we know that so-and-so is trusted and can do it. And those are the people we go to. But there are rogue companies that can do other things. But I can say that for us, certainly our sustainability report is audited, and we are sure that if you come into that company and bring anybody else, they'll be able to trace that thing down and they can see exactly what's going on.
But let me add something. I like the point you raised that responsible companies will do ABCD. But perhaps more than that, a responsible parent, particularly the lady, will not allow their children for that child labor. That's the bottom line. But they do that for supplement the income. And I do recall 2005, we had free primary education. And some of the people, kids in Nyeri, we got them out of the coffee farms. But at each time, it could not be sustained. I used to go and pick coffee. But that coffee, picking, my mother and my brother and my sister and I go and pick coffee, made sure that there was food on the table in the evening.
Well, that's the point.
And that's a choice was being made here. And there's a choice the community makes. Do I take my kid to school and we have nothing to eat in the evening, or do we go to pick coffee? The parent, and I think we should be careful, all this BBC, CNN, they have a twist of way. I listen to BBC when I'm driving and you can see the biasness. Even something so straight.
But aside from the BBC, we just have our own child act.
But when I look at that child as a parent, I'll be the last person to have child labor on that kid of mine.
And even the labor laws in Kenya, because we're involved in that, also have a requirement that you don't do that.
Indeed.
Yeah? Yes. So we've got all the legislation, we've got all the paperwork. It still happens. And it's our duty as responsible producers, responsible companies, to make sure that the law is followed to the letter. And our processes internally must make sure that happens, and we have consequences if they don't happen.
See what they did in Bangladesh. They almost killed the textile industry. The versions in New York, whatever, they say we are not going to take any fabrics from Bangladesh because there's child labor.
All right. As also Patrick is taking a call right now, let me come to you, Dr. McPhee. What is the likelihood, and how are your books going to be dented by this, if at all it continues and goes through the court processes?
I think it's very, very important, you see, that you know, the moment Kenya is labelled as you know, the problem up at James Finlay was that their recruitment process was outsourced, and the outsourced entity was actually demanding sexual favours from women who wanted to be employed there. Now the problem, the moment when this thing here is then blown up by the BBC, you've got to remember that even Americans are going to be listening to the BBC, and they themselves say, well, we are the world's radio station. And I actually do not listen any longer to the BBC because I don't want to be brainwashed. So, but the position is, okay, that you've got to remember many, many people in the Western world are fed by the mainstream media, and they don't look at things independently. You know, one of the problems is, let's suppose that you consider let's go down to Mombasa, okay, Kilifi County. Between January and June last year, 4,027 babies were born to girls between the ages of 12 and 18. So if you take the whole of the year, you multiply the number by 2, it's going to be 8,000. We've got approximately 50 counties in Kenya, so therefore, of course, that's going to be 400,000 babies born throughout Kenya to girls between the ages of 12 and 18. Now, what happens? During the holidays, these ladies are, you know, they get together, they've got nothing to do, and of course young men in Kenya are experts in telling these girls, I'm going to marry you, we've got to have sex, and etc. Now, the point is, let's go back to the American example that I was giving you. I go to the US in the summer. The schools come out in sometime the end of May, June. They have a holiday until September. So their young boy, young girl, is serving in the shop instead of the father or the mother. Now, does the whole of the world then come along and say, hey, United States, you now are denying human rights, okay, you've got child labor in the United States? The answer is no. Now, if we, you know, we actually in Sasini follow, you know, the letter of the law, because it's a very, very important thing. But I personally feel, look, I remember once, you know, the lady and the gentleman that I'm going to have lunch with tomorrow, they live in South Africa. I happen to be in Johannesburg, and we went home, and the gardener in their place actually had his son there because the mother had died, so he had his son, and I feel that that's an incredible education for that young man. He knows where his money is coming from. He wasn't actually doing the work, but he saw his father doing that work. Now, if the son helps the father, that's child labor. This is something bad. But now, wait a moment. If we keep those children in Kilifi County, in Kisii, in Nyeri, etc., if we keep them busy in the holidays, picking coffee, helping the economy, picking beans, okay, I personally feel that is beneficial. You know, one of the problems that you have with rich children in Nairobi, they're uninterested in education. They want this thing here called a degree, but they want the paper, but ability, no. And why? because the mother, especially the mothers, the mother went to school in bare feet. I cannot have this son or daughter of mine going to school without me driving them there. And, you know, you need some... I know boys who are in school at the ages of 10, 11, 12, they have 10,000 shillings in their back pocket. They don't know where money is coming from. Now, the point is, we're actually spoiling those children, you know, mothers especially. You know, the boys know how to play their mother and their father. You know, they know, well, go to mum for this, go to dad for this. They're going to play their parents. And parents are so naive, unfortunately. They just give their children more and more and more. And when the child then grows up and has to do a day's work in PricewaterhouseCoopers or H. Young or wherever, okay, those guys, they're given so much, they cannot get down to serious work. What's going to happen to Kenya? We're going to suffer as a country because those people want to live in style, but they are not productive people. Why? They've been spoiled by their parents. And so my view of this whole thing of child labor is just the part of hypocrisy of the Western world, okay? That, okay, there are certain situations where it's wrong to actually just rely on the child. If I'm a father and I'm sending my children to work and I'm not working, wow, I should be I should be in jail. In fact, I'm being irresponsible. But if my children are helping me in work, man, you're educating those children. You're doing something positive for them. You're keeping them busy. So instead of reproducing at the age of 12, you're actually making them produce at the age of 12.
Just before I come to Shem, I wanted just to maybe finalize on the bit of the Sassini, because I had indicated that last year, this time, you reported a height increase in profits in 7 years. And now we have 53.
The highest profit ever.
Highest profit ever. And we come January 2024, reporting 2023, that has dismally fallen by half.
Correct.
So is this also being reported on the back of the coffee reforms that the government is trying to install? Has it adversely affected this?
Yes.
And how also with the 5% also going to negatively affect your books as well?
This is going to be a problem for us, okay? Because, you know, I was talking to an audit firm about a week ago, and, you know, if, for example, if you actually require that person to raise the tax invoice, he probably won't be able to do it, or she probably won't be able to do it. So you then raise the tax invoice on their behalf. The problem is the tax then is immediately hit, and that person gets less than he or she would get if the tax invoice wasn't raised. So are the 1 inch going to accept this? You know, this piece of legislation has come into being without public participation. And, you know, by and large, my own view is that public participation is very often a waste of time because, you know, I've been in these forums, okay, and you discover that, you know, what people are saying, you know, this is never going to work, okay? You see, I don't like conferences. You know, you're talking about we're going to have a huge conference here. A friend of mine says, look, these are not workshops, they're talk shops. Because we talk and talk and talk and talk, and then we go out, and what do we change? Nothing. I met a millionaire in Texas, and he used to go to seminars, and he went to a seminar, and he actually implemented what he heard there, and because of that, he became a millionaire. But you know, very often in Kenya, we're talking, and we go home. What's changed? Nothing. We just paid 10,000 shillings for this seminar, and, you know, what's the fruit of it? It's nothing. So, you know, we have to see things which can work, okay? We've got to become practical people. People like my Brian Toom. Brian Toom, I always felt, you know, this is a man who's wasting his time doing a BCom because he's a born entrepreneur. And there are other guys like that. You know, the papers are talking about 175,000 children falling out of secondary. Vincent Ogutu, the VC of Strathmore University, was telling me the other day that he met a guy who never actually went to secondary. And this guy is doing incredibly well. Why? Because he's an entrepreneur. So we are worried, oh, we didn't get this karatasi na itwa KCSE. He KCSE ni bure half the time. So, you know, why? Because I get it by cheating. I have a past student, okay, who's got a daughter who's she's going on Wings to Fly, okay, she's going to do architecture in Princeton. And she brought a young man along from the Wings to Fly KU meeting, okay? And this young man was saying, you know, all of us boys, we were bragging as to how we had cheated in the KCSE. Now, they're going on their Wings to Fly to Harvard. I think this man has gone to study economics at one of the Ivy League universities in the US. He looks to be a very bright young man, okay? He's the son of a single mother, and, you know, he's probably quite clever. But how many of those people are going to go on the Wings to Fly purely because they cheated in KCSE? And we have guns and this and that. I know a secondary school teacher who says you go to TikTok or something and you get the paper in advance for 2,500 shillings. So all of this maneno about such and such a school is number one and such a school is number two. How many of those people have cheated? We've had a student in Strathmore University, when he was asked, look, how is it that you can't actually pass one examination in this place? Oh, sir, I cheated. This is it.
Through KCSE?
In KCSE. So having guns and you know, maybe soon we're going to roll out the tanks. You know, when you have an examination center, you have a tank there with a, you know. This is boring. This is useless. If I get the paper in advance,
Bure kabisa.
you know, this is it.
As Kibaki would say.
Sounds all good, gloom and doom, Shemo Jodho.
The ball in the matter of child labor, I would say two major issues. One is akin to saying you spite the nose to fix the face. Having shortcuts against ESG, meeting certain global standards, for me is like a band-aid solution to an underlying problem. The underlying problem is poverty.
Correct.
There is abject, extreme poverty. This is why a parent is forced to get an underage child to go and assist or find some money. So for me, I don't really think it's a sustainable solution. I think we shouldn't compromise on standards. And talking as a professional, I think it's the wrong way to go. But having said that, I'm also alive to the realities. I remember in a neighboring country, allow me not to mention which, the choice was being made, you're told, prioritize. How do you prioritize between providing a family with food and giving them drugs? Which do you choose? I don't think it's a very easy thing to decide. Do you give them food, or and leave them die from disease, or you treat them but they die of hunger, one way or the other? So sometimes the reality is that we have abject poverty, but there are other ways, in my view, to address abject poverty.
Name them.
Oh, there are many. We have talked about many of them, actually. Almost everybody on the panel has given suggestions, good leadership being one of them. But I wanted to come back to this aspect of education, the front page in the Standard. The 175% students, where did they go? I was crunching the numbers a little bit, and I see that's about 17.5%. In fact, it even gets worse when you consider, I haven't done the maths for this year, but last year, the what we would call pass rate, and this was like C-, the C- upwards was only like 24%. Now, looked at differently, it meant that 76% or 3/4 had failed. of our children. 3/4. That's nationwide. Basically, because if somebody gets less than a C-, as a former teacher, and we are all teachers now here, past and present, that's not good for the country. And we must ask ourselves, what is it that we can do to the livelihoods of these young people? We seem to be gracing it like it's normal, 75% of the pupils failing and every year, and this is official, that should be worrisome. So even if it was not 25, it's even this 17.5 is bad enough. It's nearly 20%. But that notwithstanding the bar, there is a video that's been doing rounds, I think of a past Coca-Cola director who said, and was addressing, I think, one of the PSS, and in our workshop. And again, I'm careful not to generalize.
Talk shop.
There are talk shops, but not all workshops are talk shops. But that's a story for another day. I try always, as a logician, not to generalize. But so this gentleman was narrating a case where they had introduced a new line of production. And to have the line, whenever there was a problem, they had to get engineers from Germany to fix it. There was an instance, I think, of a holiday or a weekend, they couldn't get the German engineers, but they had local engineers, chemical, mechanical, and all, but they were helpless. So there was a technician who told his boss, I think I can fix this problem. The boss said, why don't you go ahead and do it? He said, but on 2 conditions. One, you won't punish me if it doesn't work. Secondly, you won't punish me if anything goes wrong. He was given the go-ahead to fix. Within like 10 minutes, the problem was solved. And then the question, this gentleman, a former director, was asking, who really should have been heading that unit? Is it the engineer who is professional, or this guy, the technician? But it reminds me that the bulk of an experience I had also at Kenya Pipeline, where we had a system that whenever it went down, we would get experts from Canada to fix. And it would take us 2 weeks at least to get them to Nairobi, and it would cost 20 million shillings to fix it. It was in the telematics area, which is close to my area. I decided, I know we have good informaticians in this country and telecom engineers who should be able to fix this problem. One of them, I must say, rose to become past principal secretary. So I assembled, competitively I should say, we asked for proposals, a team of about 5 top informaticians and telecom engineers. You won't believe the bar. This problem was fixed, first of all, within 2 days, and it only cost the company 5 million shillings. And this was local capacity. And I was asking myself, the company has been spending 20 million shillings. We have to wait for 2 weeks to get them here. You know that 20 million shillings is exclusive of costs, travel costs, hotels, and all that. So the premise here is that I think technical education is something that I'm glad emphasis is being made to it, and much more emphasis needs to be made to it. But we need, apart from university education, I'm glad that the CBC system is also emphasizing technical education. But last the ball, another video has been doing the rounds of leadership, because that it rises, countries, corporations rise and fail with leadership. There is a lady who has been, again, on social media, has gone viral in Sweden. Patrick normally talks of the Nordic countries, the Scandinavian countries. Now this lady is found tweeting, waiting at a bus stop, and then boarding a vehicle and so on. And then it turns out that this lady was a minister. I mean, then I ask myself, how come it's that ministers are so humble in the other parts of the world? Can we also not do the same? A friend of mine told me the joke, if it's in Kenya, this lady would be mugged, which is a different problem that we have, that would our ministers take public transport, for example? I'm not saying exactly the same, but again, it's like using a bandage solution for our problems. If the problem is poverty is the root cause of the problem, and we know poverty is caused by leadership, Let's find a way to tackle that.
Thank you.
This is why I'm glad that the president recognizes part of our major problem is incompetent leadership. But I would say bad leadership generally.
All right. Well, I think you've raised a point and a number of issues as well. But given that we have almost 3/4 reported that have not really made the mark to join the university, and we have also the Ministry of Education now mulling over to lower the entry mark to universities. The question that we've been raising is, why are we shifting the goalposts every other time? Because we want to accommodate or we want to go. There's so many policy shifts and reforms that are coming and that are very reactionary. This is something that they're thinking. But what do we do with these constituents? When you're talking about 48,000 E-graders in a country, and I heard one of the legislators says that if you get an E in this country, where will you go?
Right. Did you want to allow me?
Let me know. I want to fix your mic because I keep on losing you a bit. Sure. So once we get that rectified, then we can actually get back to you. But let me just begin with you, Professor, because even the professors themselves in this country, there is a hue and cry of the number of professors that are in the country right now. The number seems to be going down, and we don't have sufficient professors in this country. And given a natural attrition, most of them will retire. Most of them, of course, they will die. This is natural. What is happening to our academia?
I think it's important that talk about poverty. In Nigeria, they have a minister for poverty.
Good one.
The minister is in charge of poverty.
But even here, we had the Poverty Commission, Poverty Eradication Commission.
He was fired the other day for being corrupt. I found interesting.
Poverty of ethics.
Poverty of ethics.
It's madness having those kind of ministers. But the Business Daily on page 3 has a very a good rundown of what Shem is talking about. We are not just talking about this year. We are saying for the last eight years. You have been having about 55% of candidates scoring a D in this area. And I think what the anchor is asking, what is it, what we need to do? When you look at education, it's particularly at that level, you're looking at the basic education, you have to look some of the, what are the push-out factors in the system. And one of the areas we have perhaps not addressed so strongly as a nation is the issue of the instructor, the teacher. Because what happened, about 45% of what happened in any classroom is actually the teacher. The teaching and learning materials, you must have somebody to use that. So in terms of what you're saying, what could have happened here, it's a whole fabric within itself, even the university as you talk. When you get to that classroom, and McPhee elegantly brought it, you as the instructor, you as a professor, you as a teacher, what is this you are providing to this? Are you giving it all? Or part of it I'm here, but the other part of it I'm running a boda. And you find that really what we need is to get somebody dedicated to what you're doing. I teach at the university. If I perhaps tell you how much I take home, you probably ask you must be a fool, what are you doing there? But there must be another level of you say, I have a responsibility here. I have a duty to do. And that's what this senior, as far as I can remember, has been struggling for many years because he's making an impact on the people who get out there. Yesterday we had a class in advanced statistics, and those are the issues we're talking. I said, you can get an A, that's cool. But what are you giving to the society? What are you bringing these kids? I think we have to go back in that secondary schools. We have to go back to the primary. Is a teacher really a teacher? There's a lady I was going through, she said, she's a professional. She's in India. She said, I'm a professional. I was reading something about something called discriminant analysis. But first and foremost, I'm a teacher. That got me thinking, how many of us who have been given that opportunity, that responsibility to be teaching in primary schools, can really say, I'm a teacher? And that's why we got it wrong. In my view, that will continue. And he pointed out very clearly, if you have people in secondary schools, the majority are scoring D and below, is something we need to worry. I want to be worried about the I wouldn't be worried about the number which were cheating right now. It's a small proportion. But the one in the system, what is it we need to do? We must go back and look what's happening in the classroom. And that's what George did, Magoha. He went back to the classroom and look what is happening.
All right. Okay, let's hear from Patrick Obatha. We are also just 3 minutes shy from actually winding up. I wanted to ask, what do we do with the e-graders? 48,000 of them, and this is just for this year. They are this last year and the year before. So we have a constituent which is the e-graders constituent.
I think in any statistical distribution, you will have people who are at one end and people at the other end. So let's not say that they will never be there. They'll be there.
That's the normal distribution.
All we've got to do is just to make sure that we reduce the number at that level, because
what do we do with them?
You don't have the normal bell curve that you get on classical statistical distribution. My view is that we need, right from the entry level, to have proper instruction material and infrastructure. And the digital space allows us to do a lot. So this dream that the previous government had of giving every kid a tablet and everything else, we should review that digital enablement at that level. Not by giving every kid a tablet, but by having every classroom digitally enabled in the country, so that digital learning can happen and a lot more resources can be brought in for teaching at that level. When everybody has got the same resource level in terms of resourcing delivery of teaching, and all the teachers have got the same, or at least have been trained to a level where they can maximize the use of those resources, then you will find that the back end, the guys who are getting the Ds and everything else, will shift upwards. And obviously the examination will require that you still have some people at that level, so the setting up will become more difficult.
Yeah, but that seems to be...
That will be a positive requirement, because it means that you're shifting up the quality of education.
That is the immediate intervention.
So the Ds that we're getting now, right? What needs to happen with them, I think in terms of intervention for those people, is that they need to get into skill building. They need to get into work-related, into sort of TVET type things, whatever it is, and so forth, and really build them up. And then what the president talked about, getting jobs for them outside and so forth and so on, that is the route that they take. They become skilled laborers or skilled people who they can do nursing, they can do carpentry, they can do all these electrical things and whatever it is, which are quite lucrative outside of Kenya, right? And when you start saying that we have now got a school that is producing good technical people, people who are TVET enabled, and then you send them out, we will really, those people will go out, they get skilled, they come, and then they can come back another 10 years.
Thank you.
Yes.
Right,
There's something more critical.
Briefly, as we are winding up,
Something more critical we talked about, I guess, when Patrick was not there, that there's this grave problem of only 24% of the population of the youth passing, meaning theoretically 75% fail every year. Yeah. But it gets more aggravated when you, for example, 175% completion rate lost. That's another 17.5%. In total, we are talking of 40% of our young people, on roughly every year, if we extrapolate, being compromised. It even gets worse when professors talk. The professor talks. I know of professors who resign from the university to go and run for MCA, because that's more rewarding. We are rewarding bigotry instead of merit. I mean, who should be getting better treated? I know we may not have sufficient time, but Nigeria is also now rejecting or proposing to reject Kenyan and Ugandan certificates. So fake degrees, fake education is something, the quality of
all
education.
countries in Nigeria?
Well, now you can imagine. You can imagine how far it can get.
Yeah.
So we have a lot more to do
serious.
in terms of improving the quality of our education.
Thank you. Right. Makfi, you want to say something briefly, or then one up, just 10 seconds?
I have no problem whatsoever with these young people getting their E's. My mechanic, his uncle is a first-class surgeon at Aga Khan Hospital. He's a mechanic. He loves doing that. He's sitting on property which he could sell for 200 million shillings. He doesn't do it. But he is the best mechanic. I remember I was in Mombasa and he happened to be there. In 1 minute, he solved the problem of my car. It wouldn't even work. These young people have got other skills. They don't have academic skills. The thing is that we think, he degree, as Jomo Kenyatta used to say, ile kitu naitwa degree, hii karatasi naitwa degree. Look, man, you know, I'm sure that this technician who did a better job than the people with their academic, you know,
pedigrees, yeah.
This man probably had nothing. I had lunch with a young man on Sunday. He read a book on chess. For one, you know, just read that book. A couple of months later, he was the chess champion in Kenya. People have other skills. Everyone doesn't have to go to university.
Yeah. How much better would you do with?
No, but forget about these. These people will be the future people who lead this country.
Right.
Okay? And the degree holders in the nyumbani na.
Yeah, let's go.
My parting one is something. Just somebody sent me something this morning. It says, "Mr. President,